Okay, we are rolling. 3, 2, 1, recording. Okay, everybody, welcome back to Open Game, represented by Elders of the Block. This is episode 109. We got a very special guest here today. We're going to do a quick introduction, and then we're going to get to our special guest. We got Scribe in the house representing. We got Chanel. We got Poise, and we got Lewis. And we have our special guest today, Don Estes, pronounced Estes. And to go over a quick introduction of Don, the best way I could describe him is he's kind of like Doc Brown, like the mad scientist from Back to the Future. Like this, he's going into astral realms and digging into scientific technologies that we can only dream of. He's also currently serves as CEO and director of InterSense. It's a biometric science incorporated company. He's a certified medical technologist. He's a director of a laboratory and a neuroscience scientist. He's lectured worldwide. He's been on the Discovery Channel. He's been on many different documentaries, but no more introduction is needed. Don, how are you?
Well, I'm doing great. Thanks for letting me join you tonight.
Thanks for coming in.
We got some questions we're going to jump into right off the bat. So I think we're going to kick it off with Scribe with his questions. Then we'll go to Poise and then Lewis. All right, Scribe,
Okay.
what you got?
Hey, Don, how's it going?
Fantastic. How about yourself?
Really good. This is an awesome episode of Open Game. You are number 9. Does 9 have any particular meaning to you in your life?
Well, 9's a special number. It's just the whole part of the square. The 369 thing.
Right. I was hoping you're going to say that. Okay, so all of us here have our own ways of going through the experiences that you have provided in so many different ways yourself and amongst your colleagues on what you do in your particular field of science. I feel personally that it encompasses so much that I can't really pinpoint anything with you. I feel like you have covered so many areas in order for you to move forward, and so our questions are based on our personal experiences along this journey, following you and your work. So to start off, what are the various forms, types of sensory that are recognized in your field of science?
Well, early on, I discovered that the only connection that consciousness has to the environment, whether that's the external environment or the internal environment, the only connection it has is through the sensory mechanisms. So any study of consciousness basically has to start right there with the senses. And we've sort of been taught all of our life that there are 5 main senses, but these days scientists some of them have counted 21. Just recently, I saw another one where they had actually counted 40. So the point is that consciousness has a way of spreading itself out over the entire vibrational spectrum. Should I show my screen so I can show a couple of?
Yes, please. We have that set up, Lex.
Yeah, we do. Just share it and there we go.
Okay, so let me get over here to here. Early on, after I got out of college, I basically came to realize that there's a pharmacy inside our brains, and we're the pharmacists. We can write a prescription to feel any way we want to feel, but many people won't do that. Many people will let some kind of situation that they're in or somebody else basically write the prescription. But this is really what it's all about, is about learning that we're the pharmacists and we can write a prescription to feel any way we want to feel. Now, when you start talking about senses, the senses cover different bandwidths of the so-called vibrational spectrum. And you've seen this many, many times before, where the vibrational spectrum is split up into different bandwidths that the scientists basically see them stopping in on the low end at radio waves and stopping at the high end at gamma rays. But this never really made sense to me as I was growing up, and it just didn't seem like the universe would be someplace where it would just chop things off on both ends and that'd be it. And so I became obsessed with how does this thing terminate at both ends of this thing? And make a long, long story short, I wound up taking what you're looking at here and just wrapping both ends together into something that now looks like this. And this is that same linear pattern like here, but I've got both of these ends wrapped together where they come together up here at the top. So this is the high end of the scale and this is the low end of the scale. And if you were to come down and take a look at this, if you could get close enough in here, let me see if I can get a little bit closer. You can see a little human ear right there. So there's the area that we hear. And up here, this is the light range up here. So this is the area that we see. Up here are the chemical ranges. This is all the chemistry senses we have in our body. Smells right in here somewhere. And so the point I'm trying to make is that the sensory mechanisms cover different bandwidths of this entire vibrational spectrum, but only certain little pieces of it. There's whole big gigantic gaps of reality that are going on that we're just not aware of because we don't have sensory mechanisms to sense it. But we address with our technology. I'll show you here. This is sort of a diagram of the system that I invented back in 1984 when I first got out of college. This is a hydrosonic transducer, so it's sort of like a liquid crystal mattress, a colloidal mineral mattress that you lie down on that basically turns your body fluid into a speaker. So instead of feeling like you're laying on something that's vibrating, it feels like it's actually generated inside your body and coming right out from inside out. And it had a visual component to where if you had your eyes open, you see 3D virtual reality. This is one of the things that Alex was mentioning earlier about the dolphin. We had a 3D virtual dolphin encounter that a person would see with their eyes open. And if they close their eyes, this other device takes over that's called a light and sound device that basically just plays the music that they're feeling and hearing, plays that into their closed eyelids. So they basically see the music inside of their head with their eyes closed. So with a system like this, you can get what I call sensory resonance, which is a state of mind that occurs when all of the sensory mechanisms are pulled together into one coherent experience. And when that happens, the part of the brain called the reticular activating system is a small group of nerves at the base of the brain that basically act like a relay station where all of the sensory information coming into the body goes through that mechanism first before it is relayed to different parts of the brain. And it's sort of like, I'll refer to it as Captain Kirk, because it's that part of the brain that's only interested in security and novelty. If there's anything that doesn't add up or makes sense, a little commission is put together and they go out to check it out. If there's any kind of danger, the shields go up and they deal with that. But where does everybody want to go when Captain Kirk is on vacation or he's off of the ship or everything's quiet? Where do they want to go? They want to go to the holodeck, because in the holodeck, they can dial in any place, anytime that they want to be. So we started out basically like that, trying to create a holodeck. One of the main things, though, to get really back to your question that you asked about the different sensory mechanisms, you can see how we try to include most of the main 5 ones, even including aroma. In some cases, aroma is really tricky, though, because it's very personal. And you have strange situations to where an aroma that almost everybody loves and says is their favorite just happens to be on this particular person. The aroma that was in his grandmother's perfume when she used to lock him in the closet when
Ah.
they were over to visit, or something really weird like that, you know. So it's very, very personal, the aroma thing, but we try to include as many sensory mechanisms as we can, because the more you can synchronize together, the deeper and faster it is for a person to enter those states of I call them peak experiences. It's feelings of peace and well-being and connectedness, and everything's okay and you're on the right track and there's nothing to worry about and that sort of thing. Those feelings are really hard to come by. But one of the things that really sticks out about your question is that there is another sense that not many people talk about, and that's the sense of being spiritually receptive, being open to spirit reality. And I don't think I have let me just look really fast. I don't think I have a diagram of what I want to show you. Let me see if I can find it really fast.
While you're looking through that, a couple things popped up that stems from that particular question and what you've been saying. First of all, this diagram here with the dolphins and the table and the sound that travels through you and how it provides the interaction with your senses. Have you personally went into a think tank and experienced anything from that? If you have.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Have you ever tried a think tank when you go into a vat of water and they close the lid and it's completely sound is removed?
That's actually where we started out before we ever did this. We started out with the sensory deprivation tanks. And but when we tried to market that, it got a little tricky because number one, when AIDS came out, everybody got afraid to soak in somebody else's water, and you had to have a shower for each system that you had, and a person had to take a shower before and after. It just got to be kind of not a very practical thing. So we basically just enclosed the sensory deprivation tank inside of a membrane here, where you lie on top of it instead of getting inside of it. And it actually works much better, to be honest with you, because the vibrations transfer much better.
And also from just experience, Don, that usually this device, this setup is in a very dark room that's almost like a deprivation room within itself. Correct?
Yeah, that's the way you achieve that, giving the reticular activating system what it wants, which is safety and security and sensory coherence. So we put them inside of a quiet room, kind of make sure nobody else is going to get in that room. They feel safe and secure. And then we put them into these states of sensory resonance by cohering the senses. And it has a tremendous ability to help them get into those peak moments of profound relaxation, but inspired, incredible inspiration at the same time.
You want to explain the glandular system diagram that you have up here?
Because I was getting to the point that the ability to receive spiritual information is also a sensory mechanism. And this is basically how it works. This is the third ventricle. It's a little cave right inside the center of your brain. And it's filled with cerebral spinal fluid. And the cave of this, or the the ceiling of this cave is made up of the thalamus, which is hooked up to all of the external sensory mechanisms. And the floor of it is hooked up to the hypothalamus, which is hooked up to all of the internal sensory mechanisms. And at one end of this little cave sits the pineal gland, and at the other end sits the pituitary gland. Well, this pituitary gland controls all human behavior. And what's happening here is that who you truly are, our true spiritual self, is being input into the pineal gland. And that information is attempting to get across this cave and connect with the pituitary gland. And if it did, we would all be our true selves, because the information would just go to the pituitary gland and we would behave that way. However, it never gets across this cave unscathed, because the thalamus is hooked up to all the external sensory mechanisms, and the hypothalamus is hooked up to the internal sensory mechanisms. So right here, you have all of your experience, your external and internal experience, messing with the information. And
That's insane. I know.
Years ago, we even would run, one of our partners was worked at a hospital, and they made little surgical microscopes. And so we would run a surgical camera into this third ventricle area and watch what happens. And it looks like the cilia looks like wheat in a wheat field. And you can see information going back and forth between the pineal and the pituitary gland, like wheat across a wheat field. Whoosh, whoosh, back and forth.
Wow.
But the ability of this process to work, that includes the amygdala gland and some of the parasympathetic and sympathetic systems of the body, the ability of that to function properly is what determines spiritual receptivity. And so what that leads a person to believe is that even if everybody was God conscious, if you were to ask God about it or ask an angel about it, they would say, well, that person over there is God conscious 80% of the time, and this person over here is God conscious 2% of the time. So it's a matter of how much of your time do you put toward that. So I just wanted to put that in there, because that's usually lost when people talk about the sensory mechanisms and that sort of thing.
That's crazy. Before we move on to other questions, before we move off of this, is the implication, and I'm sure you've looked into this, that people that have less sensory, like people that are disabled, visually impaired, audibly, has there ever been a study to see if any of those people have had more of a direct connectivity to their spiritual self?
Yeah, and it all boils down to that whole NLP thing, neuro-linguistic programming, that determines which sensory mechanism you rely most on, whether most people are either visual or auditory or kinesthetic. But you could throw this in there as well and say that people have an innate ability to make spiritual connection. You know that in your own life about, people that tend to be more aware of spiritual reality than other people.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I think it's also on a level of being like having people who are visually impaired being able to actually read from a book that we all can see who aren't visually impaired. Am I right?
Yeah. And one of the big things that we've been into for a long time is one of our medical doctors, a lady named Janet Ranicky, used to be the girl Friday or the right-hand assistant to Carl Symington, who was a world famous alternative cancer doctor. And she developed a whole system based on something that you've heard very little about. It's anhedonism. Everybody knows what hedonism is. But what she proved was that the first step of every disease known to humankind is called anhedonism. A person loses the ability to experience pleasure. And first of all, it's just they just kind of start shutting themselves off. They stop doing things that used to give them pleasure. All of a sudden, they're kind of a shut in, and they get sick. And we've proven this over and over in a lot of different ways. One simple way is to take one of those tinglers. I don't know if you've ever seen them or not, but it's like a little mechanism, has little fingers on it, and you put it down over a person's head, and it kind of like massages the head. It makes you have goosebumps. People that have pleasure freeze, this anhedonism is also known as pleasure freeze. And people that have pleasure freeze will say they won't like it. They'll say, "Oh, get that off of me." They'll push it away. Whereas most people will, want more of it.
Wow.
But we use one of those little tingers a lot just to test new people coming in to do sessions with us to just see if they have that condition.
Wow.
And this kind of technology can help them find their pleasure again.
Okay. Man, all of just what you said right there was an amazing interview. We haven't even got to question 2 yet. And I'm like, man, this is incredible info right here. To hear it from the man himself.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Don. Question 2, from the research book, The Secret Life of Plants, which predates roughly prior to 1973, is there any correlation with the work you have done since that experiment? And if so, how has it improved or expanded in your field?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you are aware of this or not. That book was written by Peter Tompkins and Christopher Bird.
Right.
But the book, a lot of it was based on work that had been done previously by Cleve Baxter.
Oh, okay.
And
So it's older.
And I actually spent a lot of time with Cleve up in Boulder Creek, right up above Santa Cruz there in California, when Dr. Christopher Hills, who was the big spirulina guy, I don't know if you ever heard of him or not, but we had a organization up there called the Institute for Cellular Communication, and Cleve would come and spend time with us up there. And so I did spend a lot of time with him about all of that. And it's, from working with him on all of that, it became like intuitively and scientifically obvious that all life has some level of consciousness. Even rocks and things like that, even though they seem to be somewhat unteachable. I would say that they have some kind of consciousness, but it's unteachable. But consciousness rises up depending on the ability of the organism to deal with it. So it goes through a lot of different levels, like starting out with instinct or intuition that expands into understanding, and then courage, and then knowledge, and then counsel, and then worship and wisdom. Is like 7 different levels of mind that I've been able to identify. And it may just be a matter of semantics that these days you hear a lot of people talking about how intuition is the highest state of mind. But in my way of rating things, that's basically the lowest level. It deals more with like cellular memory and instinct and that sort of thing. Whereas the highest level of mind in my viewpoint is wisdom. That's when you can actually get beyond the knowledge and see how all that fits together and see that there's a bigger picture that gets you to the worship of it all. But even higher than that is wisdom. And so somehow that that relates somehow to the spirit that lives inside of all of us, that actually lives at the highest level of the mind. You know, I hear so many people these days say, oh, let's do away with the mind. The mind gets in the way.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't agree with that. I think that spirit sits at the highest level of the mind, and you have to get spiritual thinking going on in your thought patterns to really be able to see the big picture. And so, yeah, to answer your question, plants have a level of consciousness and animals have a level of consciousness. And coming up that model that I mentioned there, it seems like animals drop off, or what we call animals. The split comes at that 5th level of council. So you'll see different animals herding together and taking counsel with each other. But you won't see many of them getting to that next level, which is worship, where you see a bigger picture of how it's all unified and fundamentally originated and has a destiny together. And so human beings exist in that 6th and 7th level of mind of worship and wisdom.
I like that. That's definitely something that we're all about. We have a matriarch, a patriarch amongst all of us in one way or another. Elders of the Block would like to reinstate that concept, which is exactly what you just said. Wisdom. Poise and I have created this whole entire thing based on our elders having the wisdom that we have thrown away for the last, I'm I haven't been here forever. So for the last few generations, being a school teacher and experiencing how children interact with their grandparents, the role that grandparents or elders have in a community is just non-existent anymore. They're all in the hospitals. We're trying to learn through our elders, our guides such as yourself, doing these experiments and doing this research, and find out how to tap into that in a way that can be done in community. Because we can't just bring what you said to everybody directly. It has to be done through a process. It's gonna, it's gonna take time because it's a higher level of thinking. So, I definitely appreciate that. What you said is key to me too, as well as you having, I think you said 7 to 9, forms of sensory perception that you believe. You said they're like all the way up to 40 or 40 something. Is it left up, the sensory types, the amount out there based on like a personal experience? So like I'm talking to you and I'm like, well, I believe there's this because I have this feeling. Can you allow that to happen? Or do you think people have an ability to just imagine too much?
Well, that's an interesting concept, because everything that we know is partly actualized, but partly still shrouded in the mystery of potential. And that actual stuff is the real stuff. That potential stuff is the imaginary stuff. And so that's a really important point that can get into some really, really deep conversation. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
you can go ahead
on.
and share it again.
Oh, I have to share it again? Okay. Where do I share? There we go. So we were actually studying this equation here. It's called the complex wave function, that describes any kind of wave, like a sound wave or a light wave or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And this equation says that the complex frequency, which is the total wave, equals the real times the cosine times the frequency plus the imaginaries times the sine waves times the frequency. And you can go online and you can do a study for sine wave and cosine wave, and you'll get millions of hits. And they tried to tell us a little bit about this in high school, and you probably remember those terms. But if you go online and you do a search for these real and imaginary components in this equation, you don't get anything. And that really just blew my mind. What is that? So we started asking around, and the best we could ever get was that those are mathematical functions that are required to solve the wave equation. And I was like, yeah, but what are they? Well, they're mathematical functions that are required to solve the wave equation. And I was like, but wait a minute, what are they? Where do they come from? Nobody could tell us, and it blew my mind. And so we started studying that. It took us a number of years to really get to the bottom of it, but it's so mind-blowing when you figure out what it is. It's so simple, because basically this one is the player and this one is the instrument. And no one's ever really thought about that before. Like this, the signal coming from your stereo down to a speaker, that wave that's coming down that wire is these real and imaginary components flying down that wire. And this one is carrying the parts that's coming from the player, and this one's carrying the parts that are coming from the instrument.
Wow.
And even as you hear me speak right now, part of what you're hearing is coming from my instrument, from my resonant cavities and my vocal cords and that sort of thing. And it always sounds like to me, I can call pretty much any of my friends, and when they answer the phone and when I speak, they know it's me because my instrument sounds that way. But it's also, what you're hearing is also how I think and feel about what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I could leave that part out and keep talking, but I'd sound like one of those guys in Battlestar Galactica who is really a computer with no inflection.
Cylon.
Or I can make my voice really passionate, but that's really coming from how I'm thinking and feeling about what I'm talking about. And so in 2014, we received a patent on separating these two components and then feeding them back to a person by putting one in one ear and the other in the other ear, and basically forcing the brain into resolving the difference between the instrument and the player. And you can look around in life and you can see what that does. When you see a better integration between a player and an instrument, the music is better. But the same thing is true of a driver in a vehicle or an operator in a machine. Anytime there's better integration between the personal aspects of something and the impersonal aspects of that same thing, the output is better. And so that's what we've really been focusing on for the past 10 or so years, is separating these two components and feeding them back to a person in a way that requires them to resolve the difference. So I show you a couple of things. Here's how that process works. A person speaks. We make a time domain image of their voice, which all these little pixels here is one of the frequencies out of their voice. Then we turn this into a diffraction gradient and shine a pure white light through it and put a screen on the other side. And we get what's called the spectral essence of a person. This is, what does the geometry of what they just said, what does that look like on the other side of the quantum veil before they said it? So this is why we refer to this as a quantum biofeedback technology, because you're basically looking at the geometry of what you just said before you said it.
Wait, so you're saying that the essence of who you are comes from your voice? Because if that's true, I'm screwed.
No, it's the other way around.
Okay.
Your voice comes from the essence.
We've pretty much proven
either way, I'm screwed. I have a horrible voice.
We've pretty much proven to ourselves that you can get better information about who a person is and what they want from their voice than you can their brain. Their brain shows how they're thinking about it. Their heart shows how they're feeling about it, but their voice shows both of those things immediately. You can hardly change your mood without it showing up in your voice.
Wait, is that why like people are really nice to me and then I start talking and then they like get really rude and
That's it,
walk
man.
away?
You just found out a secret.
Yeah, here's some examples of different people's voices, and you can see all kinds of things there. I can basically, now I've done this so many times, I can just listen to a person and tell you a lot about it just listening to their voice. But you see this face in this one? Look at that face.
Oh yeah!
Right there.
Wow.
Crazy.
And over here you can see a body. There's a head and 2 arms and 2 legs.
It looks like an Alex Gray painting.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
over here, the same thing with a head and 2 arms and 2 legs. And you can see different geometries that take place. This hourglass version here is sort of the highest harmony that we see in the system. So whenever we see this, we know that the person's done a lot of work on themselves to order themselves up.
Okay.
And this person here is really stretched out in the imaginary realm. So this might be a new agey kind of airy fairy kind of thinking person. Whereas this, with all the circles and brought into the center here, this may be like a bank president that's kind of all locked off into the to the real world.
And there's no way to do this remotely, right? You have to come into your studio to have this done.
Well, it's a software package that'll work on anybody's computer. So most people just download the package and do it themselves.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah, I've been trying to access that software.
Pardon? Oh yeah, I'm sorry. We in August of last year, we sold the patent that covers this, and they've temporarily taken it off of their website. They'll be putting it back on soon, but they are hot and heavy after another application of this technology, which improves sound so much it'll blow your mind. If you take a recording and you run them through this process and separate the real and imaginary and put them into 2 opposite ears like that, it sounds like you're standing in the room with the band that's originally recording it. It's mind-blowingly better. It's called an audio dimensionalizer. And if you're interested in that, you can go to their website. It's called Iris, IRIS, Iris Listen Well. And they actually have an app on iTunes, and I believe it's now on Android as well, where you can go download their free app and play some of your music through it to see what it sounds like.
Okay. Well,
So the Portical software is no longer available, even the Apprentice version?
Yeah, it was temporarily taken off because they're kind of studying it right now to decide whether how they want to put it back, if they want to bring it back just like it is. We have a couple of upgrades to it now. We have a little band that goes around the head that lets thoughts control it as well as a person's voice. But that has to be finished up. The drivers aren't finished on that yet. So as soon as that's up and running, we will let everybody know. And if they've subscribed to our newsletter, they'll be able to see that. This is
very enlightening, Don. In order to open it up to the group, so I don't want to cut you off there. After this, I would like to open up to the group. I know Poise has a few questions before we wrap things up, and then also Lewis has some questions too.
Okay, this is just their latest earphones that they've put out with that process built into the earphones. It also has microphones built in here and biometric sensors and all kind of things built into these headphones. So go to their website and check it out. It's a pretty amazing technology.
It's crazy. All right, Poise, you had some questions too, right?
Yeah, I had some questions that were a little off topic. I wanted to ask Don about shortly. I said I'm very curious to know about what are your patents that you have on light, color, and music.
Okay.
And I guess my second question is, can you give our viewers a little synopsis of your book, Harmonic Law, The Science of Vibration?
Yeah, certainly. My original patents were back in the early 80s on this system here that I showed you. This was my very first system here. But that was in the in the late 80s. And so these patents have expired now. And we've thought about updating the patent to some new things because we're in our 13th generation of this now. But there are people showing up left and right with these sound tables. And so I'm not sure how much longer we're going to remain in that market. If somebody does come out with something that's anywhere near comparable to this, we would probably just switch to that and start selling it, because honestly, manufacturing is really kind of a pain to keep up with. I only do it because I can't find anything out there that is comparable to this hydrosonic mattress here. I also had a patent on what was called a randomized fiber optic light projector, which was a light pipe that was about 2 or 3 inches long, filled with maybe 10,000 little fiber optics from end to end. And they were all randomly mixed in there together. So you might have like 5 groups on one end of the pipe and 20 groups on the other end. And then you shine a light through there and put a lens on it, and it would project this amazing tie-dye kind of effect onto the walls. But that patent ran out as well a number of years ago, and I didn't really do anything else with that either, because computers have come along and you can do very similar things with computers as that light pipe was doing. I just mentioned that we recently sold the patent that that covers the biometric procedure that I mentioned to you. This where a person breathes in and creates a time domain thing and gets a spectral domain image of it, along with the sounds and the vibrations that go along with that. We sold that patent along with a patent called high fidelity sound, which is the sound processor technology that I mentioned to you a minute ago. This sound processor will also create a visual that actually lets you write the math of the music right onto the screen. So pretty mind-blowing kind of technology. And then we have another patent on structured water, which is taking the sound that is used to create these kind of matrices. If I take the wires loose, see, I'll show you here how that works. We split the real and the imaginary and send one into one ear and the other into the other ear. And we ask the human brain to resolve the difference between the player and the instrument. But if I take the wires loose from this headphone and I bring them all the way over to this other device.
I think we lost your screen, Don.
Uh-oh. Okay. Here we go. Can you see it now?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I was saying that if we take the wires loose from the headphones, that where we're trying to get the person to resolve the difference between real and imaginary, if we take those wires loose from the headphones and run them over to this other device and hook them up to these two 24-karat gold wave guides that are suspended down into a reaction chamber, and we just put the sound in there and ask the water to do the same thing that we're asking the person to do, watch what happens. the water begins to implode inward on itself, cavitate. And then it goes through that same process of acknowledging the need to change, giving up the resistance, removing the unwholesomeness and the impurities, and then letting go of the old and stepping out into the new. So it goes into that vapor, and then we just reconstitute it back as liquid and then bottle it and have a person drink that water. It's the most amazing technology I've ever dealt with.
What happens when you drink the water?
It basically as everybody knows now, water carries with it its own experience, and it remembers the experience of going through that. Instead of most structured waters that are out there on the market are educated from an exogenous source. So they have the water in a vat, and out here on the outside of it, they have a coil or a magnet or a crystal or a laser that has the information on it, and they try to impart that information onto the water. But in our case, the water itself is becoming the agent of its own transformation and having to go through that experience itself. So it has to acknowledge the need to change, give up the resistance to the change, remove all the unwholesome things that are in the way and purify itself, and then let go of the old and step out into the new. So it carries with it those resources for transformation. So when a person drinks it, our body is already 70 to 90% water anyway. And it's intracellular. It goes intracellular and kicks the other water out. So you drink this for a while, and after a while, you're just filled with this water that has with it the ability to transform to the next level.
So you go through a full character arc in one swig.
Exactly.
That's crazy. All right, before we move on,
Okay.
I'm gonna put the camera back on the group here because I know Lewis had some questions too that we wanted to open up a little bit.
Okay.
Before we run out of time.
Okay.
Lewis, you
Thank
got
you,
any?
Lex. Yeah, thank you, Lex. Appreciate it, man. Hi, Don. I appreciate you having us here with you and being able to get this opportunity to talk to you. I followed in your footsteps for the past good part of last year, ever since I saw the Superhuman documentary when it came out. Prior to that, I've just been studying things on my own and through other scientists such as yourself. So a lot of my questions have to do with the idea of reality, right? And when I, listen to some of the things that you've talked about, it seems as though, it kind of falls in line with the way that I think in terms of everything is based on what we experience, our personal experiences, and the things that we tend to believe in. And it ends up being that this world is multifaceted and it's not exactly everything that we've learned in school, right? And so there's some indoctrination there into making us think a certain way. And then there's other things that happen maybe on an accidental level where we kind of perceive reality in different ways, such as premonitions or thoughts of future events, through dreams or, things of that nature. So I want to get your take on what you think about, what reality is, and maybe even get your opinion on what you think the simulation theory is all about.
Good question.
Yeah, that's a big question. What is reality? Well, we know that manifestation follows a cycle that starts off with thought, and that thought has to be expressed, and then action can be taken on that expression, and then it manifests. And one of the things we found when we've done a lot of work with people is that people seem to get stuck in one or more of those quadrants. So you'll find somebody that can just think the deepest thought, but they have a hard time expressing it. Or where you'll find most people is over in the expression zone saying, oh, I'm all this and I'm all that, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to build a center, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, but they never really do anything. Or you'll find people that will totally skip the expression and go right from the thought to the action. So they'll never fully draw the model out and make sure that it's a workable model before they start trying to build it. So they'll start trying to build it and it doesn't work, and they'll just drop it and move back to the thought. It's very unusual to find someone that can operate on all four of those quadrants at the same time. That would be like the perfect employee that you would not have to micromanage, that could think it, express it, act on it, and manifest it. You wouldn't have to do any kind of micromanagement.
Yeah, it sounds like the boss might get a little insecure about their position. You know, they might be they might be worried that that person's going to take their job.
Right.
Well, it's
So
funny that you say that, because I kind of identify with all four of those in my life, you know,
Yeah.
so go on.
yeah. So you have to be really careful what you say. You can think anything you want because thought is totally imaginary. I have a little thing here, but I'm not showing my screen right now, so I can't show you, but thought is purely imaginary. And you can think pretty much anything that you want, and it doesn't really cause a lot of trouble, except maybe some internal turmoil or something like that. But when you say it, it actually moves out of the imaginary domain and it moves into the real domain. So you make it real by actually saying it. And again, I can't really show you here, but when you say something, your intention has reached across the quantum veil, and it has considered the real and the imaginary components about that thing while it's still on the other side. And all of those actual and potential components are discrete over there. But when you say it, it actually shows up here over on this side as sine waves and cosine waves. And those automata, those real and imaginary automata, they set out to do whatever it is you intended for them to do when you speak it. And if it's just something that you just said one time, or you just say, you know, casually on one occasion, it probably just goes away. But if it's something that you say over and over and over and over again, it eventually will manifest itself and come true. So the real answer to your question is that reality is whatever we speak it into being.
As a collective or individual?
Both. I think that you know, we all have our little sphere of influence just around ourselves in our life, but we also have a connection into the collective, and that's what the whole you're probably familiar with the Global Consciousness Project, where they have these little random number generators out all over the world that are checking on the global consciousness. And we haven't really made an effort to do it, but we want to go talk to the people at Ions and Peter over in Pennsylvania there, where they're doing all of that, because our portical system utilizes the human brain as the random number generator, whereas what they have is like the equivalent of like one neuron, whereas a single human brain is like 800,000 neurons. And so if they had 800 or 900 people out using those porticles, it would be a lot more accurate than the little device that they're using. Yeah, so reality is some mechanism by which we co-create our own reality. We have certain limitations that we can act in, but within that sphere, we have total control over creating that reality. And that's what I was saying earlier. Most people won't do that. Most people will let somebody else write the prescription and create their reality.
Right. And then so as far as the scientists, many more scientists more now than ever before, getting in touch with like the idea of our world being simulated, is that partly due to, those concepts?
Yes, I think so. I think that um, there's a lot of indication right now that, well, let me put it like this. I keep talking about these automata, these real and imaginary automata that are basically the smallest, most indivisible components of any reality. But we use those in ourselves, for ourselves, in gaming. I don't know how many of you guys are into gaming out there, but there's a whole concept called cellular automata that a lot of these games work under that science, to where it's like having a little checkerboard with each player in the picture, like Sim City or whatever like that. Each one of those players has what's called a state of, it has a rule space and a state space. It has an algorithm that determines how it acts in its own little space, and it has another algorithm of how it relates to all of its neighbor cells. And that's how all those games work. And they do a pretty good job of how can I say, projecting a human kind of experience onto a player in a game, so to speak. And it makes people, or it makes characters in those games act very human-like. Let me put it like that. So you can see how some superior individual or source or origin or God or whatever you want to call it, you could see how it could be using a similar kind of technology to allow us, kind of like Sim City, we have certain limits that we can act in, but we have certain limits that are certain boundaries that limit all of those actions. And so if you want to really get into this, then you have to study something called stochastic adaptive automata, which are what happens when these small little components of reality become stochastic and they become adaptive, to where they can adapt to their environment. But they start out being very chaotic, and it takes them a while to order themselves up. To me, that sounds a lot like what we're doing,
Artificial intelligence.
Yeah. And so that gets off into a whole other thing there about how do you define what is artificial and what is natural. But that's a whole other subject that we could talk about for hours.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We could go down a lot of different paths when it comes down to this stuff. Just one last quick question. Have you ever been around or worked with the Monroe Institute or Robert Monroe at all?
Yeah, Robert was a good friend. I studied Hemasync under Robert before he passed. And I also knew his daughter, Lori, very well, that she took over when he passed. And I was good friends with her until she passed. And then Skip Atwater is now still a good friend that runs the organization up there. So I'm very, very familiar with all of his stuff. I used to get aggravated with him when I would be deep, deep down in a meditation, and all of a sudden his voice would come and say, now go to go to level 24 or something like that. And I would like, just shut up and get out of my meditation, please. But no, I knew them very well. We've kind of moved on now to a whole other thing that we would call, most of that was based on binaural beats, which is now sort of becoming, well known. And a lot of people know about it and are into it and using it and that sort of thing. But we moved on beyond that about really 20 years ago when we discovered this thing about real and imaginary. And what that allows us to do is it allows you to do binaural phasing instead of binaural beating. So like in binaural beating, you have like two different frequencies. You have like 100 hertz over here and 107 over here. And you listen to this when you get wah, listen to this when you get wah, but you hold them together, you get wah, 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 with that wah, wah being the difference between the two. Whereas in our difference or in our situation, we may have 20,000 frequencies in this ear and the same 20,000 frequencies in this ear, but they're out of phase with each other. One's carrying the real phase and the other one's carrying the imaginary phase. So you can imagine all of the additions, subtractions, and beating and all that that's going on in a situation like that. It's just much more comprehensive.
Just real quick for those in the audience that aren't aware of Bob Monroe or kind of the background, it's particularly peaked up in interest these days ever since the declassification of CIA documents regarding the gateway process. And as Don was talking about, HemiSync is a procedure or a methodology they used in the CIA for meditation and being able to achieve out of body experiences. Or I'm sure Don, you could explain it a lot better, but just to give some people some background.
Yeah, they call it entrainment, where you could actually entrain the brain to follow a signal into what they call a focused brainwave state. So they have like delta states or theta states or alpha states or beta states. And what we've discovered is that the best state is what we would call an expanded state. So instead of having a delta or theta or alpha focus, we have an expanded state to where all of the brain is lit up at the same time. So you may have octaves going on of like 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and 32 or something like that.
So, my whole life I've experienced those kinds of things, and it's been, people such as yourself and Bob Monroe and a few others who have given me answers to these things that made me think that I was crazy. So I really appreciate the work that you've done and, everything that you've done for humanity, because it's so important. I think it can answer a lot of things for other people that they'd rather not maybe go into or talk about because they think it's conspiratorial or taboo or whatever. But I think it's life, and that's the way I view it. So I appreciate everything that you do. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure. It falls over into all other aspects of our life too, to where all of us out here that are inventors, we rarely have the money and everything to hire guinea pigs or that sort of thing. So we wind up being the guinea pigs ourselves, and a lot of inventors die young because it takes them their whole life to figure out what they're doing wrong until they finally get it right. And then everybody else gets to take advantage of that. And then here they are having to deal with all of the times that they got it wrong. But luckily, I haven't experienced that yet, so I'm doing pretty good.
I'm going to call you Doc Brown from now on. I just watch Back to the Future.
Yeah, I'm one of those.
Crying.
I'm one of those few people that have hung around since the 60s. I got my start in the 60s with all of this when before they made psychedelics illegal, and we were just making it in the laboratory, and it was wonderful. I loved it. I wanted to live there, but it was obvious that there was a compensatory lag time. So you didn't feel so great the next day. So I dedicated my life to coming up with a way to achieve in those altered states of mind without having to pop a pill. And that's basically how we got here.
That's beautiful.
Don, can you give the quick synopsis of your book, Harmonic Law, The Science of Vibration?
Yeah, I was just about to do that because I believe it was Posey. Somebody asked that question.
Yeah, poise.
Yeah, let me go back over here to so this is the book, and basically the bottom line of this book was just simply that I read every book that I could read out there about vibrational science, and every book that I read said something different. And so it's just like, that can't be the case. So I need to go figure this out. So I went around all around the world and I apprenticed under all these so-called experts of vibration, light, sound, color, uh, magnetics, lasers, subtle energies, all those kinds of things. And I went around and I apprenticed under them. And then in 1999, I wrote this book that was my experience of having dealt with them all. And I originally called it Harmonic Law, the science of vibration. But then after I got to really studying all this, I realized that the universe is not really based on law. The universe is based on liberty. The laws only exist to control the actions of universal citizens that can't take care of themselves or can't be responsible for their own actions. So these laws exist out there. So I went back into the book, and on the inside of the book, I changed that to harmonic principles and instead of harmonic laws. And it taught me a lot about even my own life. Like it taught me in dealing with my family and my two teenage daughters. It taught me how to deal better with them instead of creating a bunch of laws around how they can act around in the house and around people. I created principles. So an example would be that if there's somebody in the house and your screaming or yelling is going to bother them, don't do it. But if there's nobody in the house, who cares? Scream your lungs out. So it's not a law that you can and cannot do these things. It's that there are principles that you put in place for your life that basically controls your action. So in this book, I basically tried to describe what you were talking about earlier about the reality. What is reality? How does it work? And so in this book, I described the primacy of the personality of the I am. I try to do my best to describe the big picture and how it's not about this mundane day-to-day life that we live down here on the planet. There's a huge big picture going on in the whole universe. And in the book, I talk about unity through harmonic diversity. Everybody's always talking about diversity, and it's true that diversity is not only wanted, but it's what keeps the spice of life going, all the diversity. But what I think people forget a lot about is that diversity has to be harmonic. The keys of a piano cannot just decide to be whatever pitch they want to be. They actually have to find some place in there and they have to become something that fits in with everything that's going on around them. So that diversity has to be harmonic. I also talk about the fact that most scientists just look at the history of reality. They don't really want to talk too much about the origin and the destiny of it, which are huge subjects, much bigger than the history of it. But looking at the origin and the destiny and knowing that those are both the same place, that we're going back to our origin. And you can get into a lot of really, really deep conversations about that.
Well, when you talk about harmony, though, isn't in conjunction with harmony isn't kind of order, like the order in which things occur in our four-dimensional reality? Like
more like
if you're to project it into society, like if we were trying to achieve a harmonic society, when there certain things when you would to achieve in a specific order in order to
Well,
achieve that?
you would diversify it according to everybody's personalities. Like, for example, if you're going to choose cops for your new world, you'd probably choose British cops, right? These Bobby guys. If you're going to choose engineers, you'd choose Germans. And so it's all a matter of ratios and what people are good at, and allowing people that are good at this to do that, or good at something else to do that. It's about diversifying into the thing that makes it all harmonic. The book also talks a lot about the difference between absolute and relative, like this chart here. And I might mention, we probably don't have time to talk about this, but much more important than the book is this chart, because this chart really explains how everything that's in the book really comes together and relates to each other. But on this chart, you'll see everything from the quantum that is here. This is the fastest frequency in the known universe, and it slows down. It starts out as primal force that slows down and becomes elementary particles, and then those slow down and become atoms, and then molecules and cells and tissues and organs and organisms.
And also just to remind everybody that Don put this chart together. He won't brag about it, but he did this. This isn't something he pulled off the internet.
That's
and he sells it on his website too.
And then super organisms like humans and planets and star systems. You can even see the Milky Way in here as a very long frequency or slow frequency. And out here on the edge of it, you can see our little solar system with the Earth being right here. So the point I'm trying to make is, from here all the way around back to the gravity constant over here, all of that is relative by frequency. However, the rest of this chart, all this in here, attempts to explain the absolute nature of reality that's holding the relative parts together. So I kind of see this as God's two hands, and this is a curtain that God has stretched out between these two hands that are holding it open like this. But this is all of the archetypes and the stuff then in the absolute values from which all the relative stuff came.
Is that a poster that is available to purchase on your website?
Yes.
Okay.
One
today.
It won't print by 4-color process, because each one of these little small writings here, the computers has to outline any color differences. So it has to outline all this in here, and it turns into 16 gigabytes and shuts the printer down. So the only way it will print is with a printer that takes a high definition digital photograph of it and prints it on Kodak paper.
Okay.
So it's more like a digital photograph than a poster. But it
says it's 38 inches by 43 inches.
Yeah.
Is that
yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
And so this book talks about time and space, and about music and the music language and music theory and the law of the octave, and the nested structure of reality, existential versus experiential, and eventual realities, which is a whole nother subject that would take us a long time to talk about. It talks about the difference between finite and absolute realities, or infinite and absolute realities. Talks about the superconductive nature of the void. It talks a lot about the toroidal shape of pretty much all realities. And
that's a fascinating section right there.
Yeah, it's like I'll show you one of the
That's
things.
the donut shape. Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
The donut shape?
Yeah, check this out. This is
it's planet Earth.
This little video right here proves how these real and imaginary components actually create dimension. So watch this. If I take this energy field back down to null, I get a 0-dimensional point. But if I add one real and then one imaginary and then a couple of more imaginaries and then one real and 3 more imaginaries, I can turn that into the first 4 dimensions. So watch this. This is going back to null. This video demonstrates how real and imaginary combinations create shape and geometry. Beginning with null, we create a 0-dimensional point. Adding one real component creates a 1-dimensional line. Adding one imaginary component will bring about a circle. Adding one more real and 2 more imaginary components can turn the circle into a sphere. And 3 more imaginary components can create the shape of the torus.
Wow.
So, so the book talks a lot about toroidal fields and how we each have a toroidal field, and it basically even shows. See if I have it on here. It's not in this particular show, so it can basically take the torus apart, each one of these little things here, and actually show you the connections of your own toroidal field. You can see how the toroidal field can become interdimensional like that, where it's actually dimensions stacked inside of the outside and they all go through this little vertex in the center there. So the book talks a lot about that.
Is that magnetism?
Yeah, it's magnetism and electricity. So it talks a lot about creation versus evolution and eventuation. It talks about real versus imaginary and pattern and form and relationships based on sacred geometry, and how the universe is energy is encircuited between the quantum and the gravity constant, and talks about a continuous Big Bang. Instead of there being a Big Bang 13 billion years ago, every quantum moment there's a new Big Bang. And talks about spiritual technology and the race to inner space, methods and applications of vibrational therapy. There's so many different people doing different types of vibrational therapy. Wow. And a lot about how to apply harmonic law in a person's day-to-day life. But when I finished that book, I was still just as confused as ever. And I decided that I would try to chart it out. And I thought when I got that all done that I would find the one person who was right and everybody else would be wrong. But what I found instead was that everybody is out here on the outside perimeter of reality looking in. They're all after this good stuff in the center, all this absolute stuff. But they're out here on the edge looking in. And they all have blinders on. They only see it from that one area. So the light therapist and the color therapist see this little zone here, and the chemists are here, and the physicists are up here, and the astrologers are over here, and the sound therapists are down there, and the dance therapists are over here. So everybody chooses a place to look at all of this from, but they've got blinders on.
That's just so crazy. Don, do you mind if I see your beautiful face real quick?
Oh, you can't see me? You can't see my face?
I'm just going to turn your screen off real quick.
Here I go.
So that's crazy you just said that, because my screen looks terrible. One of the questions that Scribe and I wanted to ask you was when the topic of like fringe science comes up, because we had a previous show where this topic came up of like, people that weren't ready to bridge the gap between kind of the spiritual realm, the realm beyond what we can see, feel, or, agree as what is an experienced reality, and bridging the gap between science, and connecting it to this kind of imaginary realm that we're talking about. I wanted to ask you about that. Basically, you just answered the question right there, that people are really on their own slice of perspective. But I want to hear kind of like what your personal thoughts are on it.
Well, I think one of the questions that was sent to me, I can't remember who did it, but someone asked for me to give the reasons that I believe that there's a God.
Hmm.
That was
And
me.
oh, hey. And actually, there's a lot to it. We don't have time for me to go through. There's about, I have, I think, about 15 or 16 things that I've come across that have me convinced of that. But dropping back to the most basic one is that I was raised as a fairly strict, primitive Southern Baptist home, and very, very strict rules and things like that. And we were always taught that you don't question God, or you don't, who are you to question anything like that? So that we were told to kind of leave it alone. But over the years, I learned that the only way that you can find out if it's true is to test it. And so when I became conscious, the least little bit conscious, and started thinking about all of this, I would feel like I would hear the universe telling me something that it wanted me to do. And I would think about it for a minute, and I would say, well, there's no way that I can do that because I don't have that resource or that resource. And the universe would always say back to me, and it said, yeah, but you can do number 3 and number 7. And so I would back up for a minute and say, okay, well, I tell you what, I'll make you an agreement that I'll do number 3 and number 7. And I would make that agreement with myself. And like that, number 1 and 2 would happen.
Yeah.
And then I'd be sitting there with egg on my face, having to do number 3 because it was already my turn. So I would do number 3, and then 4, 5, and 6 would show up like that. And then I'd have to do number 7. And that happened to me so many times that there's no way in the world anybody would ever be able to convince me that it doesn't exist anymore,
Right.
because it has showed up in my life.
It's like you're constantly negotiating with the channeling of consciousness.
It sounds like it's related to Poise's third question about calling things into existence. And you did speak on that already, Don. So do you think that that had a part of that, though, that God is also within us, so to speak, to where when we call things into existence, for example, your story of number 1 just happening for you?
Right. Yeah, no, that's been my experience with it pretty much my whole life. And so it's kind of like somebody trying to convince me that you didn't exist. Now I've met you, I've talked to you, I know you're real, and I have that experience with this entity in my life now that has just shown itself so many times. But it always requires me to co-create. It never creates it by itself. There's definitely a co-creation going on, that we have to see the plan, we have to agree to it, and we have to do whatever parts we can do, even though we can't do all of them. It has shown me that it has the resources to step in and take care of those pieces that I can't do myself.
Don, he answered, he had something I wanted to speak on, that he answered up with Louise in a way that he simplified it. Like the way that I express how I came in contact with the knowledge of knowing that I could literally bring whatever I want from the unseen into the seen world, into my existence. was like you said, through the word of speech. And when I looked at your diaphragm, the portico last week, when I knew you were going to be on the show, and I saw the diaphragm, and I couldn't explain it to people like that, you know, because the way that I explain it is basically, when I think of something, the unseen particles, they move in motion, they start getting into motion. And then once I speak it, that's when they start turning into a form, into matter. And you just broke down so much of this science, because you're a scientist, you know, amongst many other things, but you opened up so much, man, in just one session. You know, like Scribe said, we haven't even touched on the surface of it. And when I tell you this, Don, I want you to really understand that I mean this when I say this, because I'm not the type of guy who blows smoke up, you know, up people's butts. But you're literally my favorite. This is my favorite show right here, because I'm living in what you're speaking on and what you've been studying probably before I was born. I'm living in this right now. My power is that once I decide to bring something to me, I have to gain this feeling inside, and I have to hold on to this feeling. I call it an energy, and I have to keep it up at least 3 or 4 days out of the week to keep it vibrating, to bring it into existence. And you're saying you're just breaking it down so thorough, and it has me so excited. Not that my experience is being verified or anything, but that someone else has been studying this all these years. And I just came across this a few years ago when I just started really meditating and self-visualizing and understanding the power of speech, you know, the power of word and the power of vibration. So this is definitely has been my favorite show. This is our 9th episode, and I am so excited, brother, that you came to share and grace us with your experiences, your life, your story, your studies, your you know, your life, everything that you put into this work that you've been doing. It is so beyond everything. It's like, what else is more important than this study, you know, on the planet? Like,
I think the only thing that is more important than vibration is a person's own spiritual evolution. Other than that, vibration, I think, is the most important thing a human being could study.
Okay,
Luis, any last things to wrap up, Luis?
Man, if I say anything more, it's going to send us into a 3rd hour. So
we'll get Don back.
Yeah,
I'm just really appreciative, you know.
Right, me too.
You,
the last thing I want to wrap up with is, Don, is there anything that we can plug on here to wrap up and, you know, print on the screen for the edited version? What's going on with your website? We just talked about your book. You have that chart, that amazing chart. What's going on with your website, and how can people, you know, connect with what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm going to get rid of this. That's not the email anymore. That's the correct information right here for the website.
It's not sharing. Are you trying to share?
Oh yeah, sorry. Here we go. Here we go. So there's the latest information on our name, address, the new website, my email. And yeah, you can help us promote that and help people subscribe to our newsletter, so they will all be informed as to what's going on, what we're doing. If you haven't checked out the new website yet, it's pretty mind-blowing, and they can get any information that they want on products or services or anything like that right here on the website. And this is one of the things that we want to promote soon. We're not really quite ready to do it. June or July is this Transcendome experience, where we have 30 of our tables inside a geodesic dome, and we have a new kind of projection screen in here where this becomes just a seamless screen that you can immerse someone in to where they don't see anything else other than that screen. And it's really mind blowing. I have 5 different ways of a person visualizing their voice and their thoughts now that can be projected onto that entire screen. And we have a new technology called Illuminex, which instead of using the little flashing light glasses that some of you have seen or tried, it actually turns the whole dome screen into a light and sound device, so no one has to wear any glasses. It's a 1 million lumen light projector.
Oh, that's pretty bright if anybody's a projector nerd like me.
This guy's a
Yeah.
projector nerd.
1 million.
Don knows how much of a projector nerd I am, right, Don?
Yeah, for real. So you could help us promote some of these things. We're selling the equipment now, and we're setting up these domes. We've got a lot of different applications going on here. So just have people go to the website and contact us about any kind of services or products that they want to purchase, or domes that they want to help us put up someplace.
Okay.
And
We need to do an Elders of the Block field trip.
there you
Luis, I already had that idea, man. I think this needs to be implemented into one of the 64 workshops.
Burning Man 2021.
go. Yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
Luis
We were there on at Red Lightning about 3 or 4 years ago, right there in the center of the plaza. And we had the big dome up and everything there. I don't know if any of you were there that year, but we'll definitely be bringing this to Burning Man as soon as they open it back up again.
Hey, this will be better than doing the Toad.
Yeah.
Right. Are you still living the AHA spa life?
I am.
All right.
Where are you guys?
We are in the Bay Area. Luis is in San Diego. Lex, I don't know where you are. You went off the map, man. You off the
I'm up
grid
in
now.
Mendo, bro.
Oh, you're up in
Emerald Triangle.
Okay.
We'll have to be in touch with you on where these domes are and these experiences are. And because Luis brought up a thing that I already favored, which is for us to take some kind of a field trip as an organization and come visit and experience this.
Yeah, cool. I'll be up your way sometime this summer. We just installed a big system in Ashland,
Okay.
in a center up there.
That's in Oregon, correct?
Yeah. And then
Interesting.
and we're working on another one of these domes to go into Portland, which they needed about as bad as anybody on the planet, I think.
Huh.
And so I have a lot of things going on up there. We have one of our systems in the Center Point Health there in Mill Valley. We have a practitioner that's there doing a lot of work with the system. So I'll be up there sometime this summer. Maybe we can.
We will too, Don. We might see you. We got something going on in August up there. We're going to join with a group. Something happening in Portland in August. So we'll be in touch and see if we can cross paths up there.
All right. Very good.
One last thing I'd like to say, ask actually, is what's your superpower?
Well, let's see. I guess my superpower is basically the ability just to see the big picture. I can see the details, but I prefer to back as far away from it as I can and see the big picture. And it's allowed me to do a lot of things with my life, because I've noticed, for one thing, a lot of people have trouble just being aware of what's going on around them. So a lot of people aren't aware of what's going on around them, but it's a whole different story to learn how to be aware of how you're being aware.
Right.
And when you learn to live like that, you can basically create your own reality. So that's basically probably my superpower, is the ability to extract myself from it and observe myself doing it. And boy, it sure helps me out with my wife. I put it like that. 'Cause I know the next thing coming out of my mouth is gonna set everything up.
Right, right.
And
Well, you know what? I need to look at these things a little bit different than what I already know. Poise has been a big part of my life with that. Luis has. Lex came into my life, and here you are. I think everything happens for a reason. So we're definitely going to be looking more into what you're doing, staying in tune, keeping in touch. And like Lex said, we'd love to have you back and be a part of this again.
great. I will be looking to for that to occur.
Yes, us too. Thank you so much. Lex, you want to close us out?
Yeah, so this is wrapping up 109. Everybody, open game. Elders of the Block in the house. We got Don, Estes. It's been wonderful talking to you. We've been traveling, traversing many dimensions throughout space and time and spirituality. And you've done an actually amazing job at the legwork and the detail and the research, and dedicated your life into and never giving up on the reality, which is there's a whole infinite existence going on outside of what we can see with our basic human senses. And thank you for sticking with it. Thank you for not changing. Thank you for not giving into the skepticism and continuing on that path to prove to everyone that this isn't just a mundane existence where everything is what it appears to be, that magic really does exist in life. So thank you, and we look forward to having you again. And one love, everybody. Have a great week. Until next time, peace.
Thank you, Don. Take care, everybody.
Everyone.